All eyes turned to the man in the stained lab coat pushing a metal cart through the pristine corridors of the Philadelphia Advanced Transplant Center. His weathered hands gripped the cart handle as doctors in designer scrubs whispered and laughed, their eyes following the organ janitor who'd once held their most prestigious title. But those hands held knowledge that would soon accomplish what every elite transplant surgeon in the building had declared impossible, and reveal a truth that would expose the corruption at the heart of America's organ transplant system. It was a humid spring morning when Gabriel "Gabe" Morrison, 45 years old, arrived at the transplant center's organ preservation lab in the basement. His worn lab coat bore stains from years of handling biological materials that surgeons upstairs considered beneath them. Gabe worked as an organ preservation technician. Now the person who prepared donated organs for surgery, maintained the preservation equipment, and disposed of organs that were rejected. He was invisible to the transplant surgeons discussing million-dollar procedures, ignored by the nurses who prepared surgical suites, non-existent to the administrators who decided which patients received life-saving organs. He spent his days in the basement, surrounded by refrigeration units and preservation machines, doing work that required extraordinary medical knowledge but received no recognition. The irony was suffocating. He'd once taught these same surgeons techniques they still used, published groundbreaking papers on immunosuppression, achieved a 94% success rate on cases other surgeons declared impossible, but that was 13 years ago. Before everything collapsed, the hospital was consumed by a devastating crisis that morning. A 7-year-old boy named Lucas Chen was dying in the pediatric ICU, his heart and lungs failing simultaneously from a rare genetic condition. He needed a double transplant, heart and lungs together, within 24 hours, or he would die. But Lucas had an extremely rare blood type and antibodies so aggressive that his body had already rejected for compatible organ sets. Every transplant surgeon in the facility had reviewed his case. Every single one had refused. The odds of success were below 5%, and failure would destroy their perfect statistics. Lucas's parents, David and Sarah Chen, had exhausted every option, spent every dollar, begged every surgeon. Now they sat in the ICU watching their son suffocate, waiting for death, because no one would risk their reputation to save him. "This is absolutely tragic, but we have to be realistic," Dr. Harrison Blackwell announced in the morning staff meeting. He was 58, Harvard Medical School director of the transplant program, and the most arrogant surgeon Gabe had ever encountered. The Chen boy is a statistical nightmare. For rejections, that's for sets of perfectly good organs wasted. I will not authorize a 5th attempt. Harrison, he's 7 years old, said Dr. Michelle Santos, 42, a transplant surgeon who'd built her career on safe, easy cases with guaranteed success. Surely we can try. Try what? Harrison interrupted. Michelle, your success rate is 97%. Mine is 98%. Do you want to destroy that with a case that's virtually guaranteed to fail? The family signed the consent forms. They understand the risks. They understand we're giving up, said a younger voice. Drive. Jason Webb, a 31-year-old transplant fellow, looked uncomfortable. Dr. Blackwell, I've read the literature on high antibody cases. There are experimental protocols that ended careers. Dr. Kenneth Price interjected. He was 50, the transplant coordinator whose obsession with metrics and statistics determined which patients even got on the transplant list. Remember Gabriel Morrison? He tried experimental protocols and ended up in prison for organ trafficking. No thank you. Nurse Deborah Miller, 48, a transplant nurse who'd worked at the center for 20 years, shuddered visibly. Morrison was a criminal. He stole an organ from a legitimate patient and gave it to someone who paid him. People like that shouldn't be in medicine. In the basement, Gabe heard every word through the intercom system that connected the preservation lab to the surgical floors. He was supposed to be preparing the 4th set of rejected organs for disposal. Lucas Chen's last hope, now being packaged for incineration. What about the family? Jason asked. Don't they deserve to know that options exist? What options? Harrison said coldly. Kid has antibodies against everything. His body is rejecting organs before we can even transplant them. It's not the surgical skill, it's basic immunology. Some cases can't be solved, so we just let him die. Jason pressed. We let nature take its course, Kenneth said. Jason, you're new here, so let me explain how this works. We have a 98% overall success rate at this center. That's why we're ranked number 1 in the country. That's why donors' families trust us with their loved ones' organs. That's why patients come here from around the world. We maintain that standard by choosing cases we can win. That's not medicine, Jason said quietly. That's statistics. Statistics are what keep this program funded, Kenneth snapped. One high-profile failure and donations drop. Funding gets cut. The entire program suffers. Is one boy's life worth destroying our ability to save hundreds of others? Gabe's hands clenched around the organ container. He'd heard this argument before. 13 years ago. Right before they destroyed him for refusing to accept it. The Morrison case proves my point, Harrison said. He was brilliant, I'll admit that. Best transplant surgeon I ever saw. But he let emotion override judgment. Gave an organ to a poor kid instead of following protocol. The patient he bumped from the list died. Morrison went to prison. His career was destroyed. That's what happens when you try to be a hero instead of a doctor. That's not what happened, Gabe muttered to himself in the basement. But no one was listening. They never did. After the meeting, Gabe returned to his grim task, preparing Lucas's rejected organs for disposal. But as he examined them under the preservation hood, his trained eyes caught something every surgeon upstairs had missed. The organs were perfect. The damage wasn't from rejection. It was from the preservation protocol. Someone had used the wrong preservation solution. The pH was off. The temperature had fluctuated. The perfusion pressure was inadequate. These organs had been damaged before they even reached Lucas's body. Gabe's pulse quickened. This wasn't an immunological problem. It was a technical problem. And technical problems could be solved. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through files. He'd kept hidden for 13 years research papers he'd written in prison. Techniques he'd developed in secret. Protocols that could revolutionize transplant medicine if anyone would listen. But who would listen to an ex-con organ technician? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know you see it. The preservation failure. We need to talk. T.E. Thomas Erickson, Gabe's former mentor. The immunologist who'd testified at his trial. The only person who knew the truth about what really happened 13 years ago. Gabe texted back. Where? Cafeteria.now. Lucas Chen doesn't have time to waste. 10 minutes later, Gabe sat across from Thomas in the hospital cafeteria. The old man looked frail at 70, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. You saw it, Thomas said. It wasn't a question. The preservation protocol was wrong, Gabe confirmed. Those organs never had a chance. Can you fix it? Gabe hesitated. Thomas, I'm a technician. I prepare organs for disposal. I'm not authorized to. I didn't ask what you're authorized to do, Thomas interrupted. I asked if you can fix it. Can you save that boy? Gabe looked around the cafeteria. Doctors and nurses ate lunch, gossiped, checked their phones. None of them knew that a 7-year-old was dying upstairs, because they valued statistics over human life. Yes, Gabe said quietly. I can save him. But Thomas, if they find out I'm involved, they'll destroy you again, Thomas finished. I know. Gabriel, I've spent 13 years trying to clear your name, trying to expose what really happened. The corruption, the money, the political influence that let wealthy patients buy their way up the transplant list. And, Gabe asked bitterly. And I failed, Thomas admitted. The system protects itself. But Gabriel, I didn't fail at one thing. I proved you were right. That organ should have gone to Maria Rodriguez, not Senator Whitmore. You followed the official UNO's list. You did exactly what the rules required. They destroyed you for following the rules because the rules didn't serve the powerful. Tell that to Senator Whitmore's family, Gabe said. Tell them their father died because I gave his heart to a poor Mexican girl. Tell Maria Rodriguez's family that she's alive, graduated from college, and just started medical school, Thomas countered. Tell them she's alive because you had the courage to follow the transplant list. Instead of political pressure, Gabe was quiet. He'd followed the list. Maria Rodriguez had been #1 for a pediatric heart. Senator Whitmore had been number 68, but the senator's connections had tried to push him to the top. Gabe had refused, had performed the transplant on Maria. The senator died 3 days later when no compatible heart appeared. The senator's family destroyed Gabe, accused him of accepting bribes from Maria's family, of organ trafficking, of letting a valuable American die to save an illegal immigrant child, even though Maria was a U.S. citizen born in Texas. 8 years in federal prison, medical license revoked permanently, career obliterated, family shattered, and worse, so much worse. My son needed a kidney transplant 3 years into my sentence, Gabe said, his voice hollow. He was 4 when I went to prison, 7 when he needed the surgery. No surgeon would touch him. They said operating on the organ trafficker's son would destroy their reputation. He died on the waiting list. 7 years old, same age as Lucas Chen. Thomas reached across the table and gripped Gabe's hand. I know, and I'm sorry. Gabriel, I'm so sorry. But that's exactly why you have to help Lucas. Because you understand. Because you know what it means when the system fails a child. Because you can't let another 7-year-old die when you have the knowledge to save him. They'll come after me again, Gabe said. Probably, Thomas agreed. But this time, you'll have me. You'll have documentation. You'll have proof that your techniques work. And Gabriel, times are changing. Social media, patient advocacy, whistleblower protections. We can fight back in ways we couldn't 13 years ago. Gabe thought about his son, about Lucas Chen, about Maria Rodriguez, alive and thriving, because he'd made the right choice even though it destroyed him. What's your plan? He asked. Thomas smiled. You fix the preservation protocol. I'll handle the politics. But Gabriel, we need to move fast. Lucas has maybe 18 hours left. I need access to the preservation equipment, Gabe said. The good equipment, not the obsolete machines in the basement. You'll have it, Thomas promised. I still have consulting privileges here. I'll authorize an equipment audit of the main preservation lab. You'll have access. And when Blackwell finds out, by then you'll have saved Lucas, Thomas said. And Gabriel, this time, I won't let them destroy you. This time, the truth comes out. That afternoon, while the transplant surgeons were in a conference on the 3rd floor, Gabe entered the main organ preservation lab. Thomas had cleared the staff, citing sterility concerns during the equipment audit. Gabe had 6 hours, maybe less if someone got suspicious. He pulled up Lucas Chen's complete medical file. Blood type, antibody profile, genetic markers, immunological history. Every rejection mapped in detail. Every failed attempt documented. And there it was, the pattern no one else had seen. The problem wasn't Lucas's antibodies. The problem was that every preservation protocol had used the same standard solution, a solution designed for patients with normal antibody profiles. Lucas's antibodies attacked a specific preservative compound in that solution. The organs were being damaged before transplantation even began. Gabe began redesigning the entire protocol. First, he mixed a custom preservation solution removing the compound Lucas's antibodies targeted, adding immunosuppressive agents that would begin working before the organs even entered the body, adjusting the pH to match Lucas's exact blood chemistry. Second, he programmed the ex vivo perfusion machine, a device he'd actually invented 15 years ago but never got credit for because of his imprisonment. The machine would keep the organs alive and functioning outside the body, while exposing them to Lucas's blood chemistry gradually, allowing them to adapt before transplantation. Third, he created a personalized immunosuppression protocol based on Lucas's genetic profile. Not the standard drugs everyone used, but a tailored combination that would specifically target his antibody production pathways. It was revolutionary. It was beautiful. It was medicine at its finest. And he was doing it with equipment the hospital had relegated to the basement as obsolete. 5 hours later, Gabe had redesigned the entire transplant protocol. He'd prepared new preservation solutions. He'd reprogrammed the perfusion system. He'd created detailed surgical instructions that even a moderately competent surgeon could follow. All he needed was someone willing to try. His phone rang. Thomas. We have a problem, Thomas said. Harrison found out about the equipment audit. He's coming to the lab. You need to leave now. I'm not done, Gabriel. If he finds you in that lab without authorization, he'll have you arrested for trespassing. Maybe worse. Whatever you've done, pack it up. Meet me in the parking garage in 10 minutes. Gabe looked at his work. 6 hours of precise medical engineering that could save Lucas Chen's life. If he left now, it would all be for nothing. Unless. He grabbed his phone and started recording a video. 45 minutes of detailed explanation. Every step of the protocol. Every scientific justification. Every modification he'd made and why. Then he copied everything: the preservation solutions, the perfusion program, the immunosuppression protocol onto a USB drive. He was packing up when the lab doors burst open. Drive. Harrison Blackwell stood there, flanked by hospital security. What the hell do you think you're doing? Harrison demanded. Gabe straightened slowly, meeting Harrison's eyes. My job. Maintaining the preservation equipment. Your job is in the basement with the disposal units, Harrison said coldly. This lab is for transplant surgeons only. You're trespassing, Doctor. Erickson authorized my access, Gabe said calmly. Doctor, Erickson has no authority over transplant facilities, Harrison said. He's a consultant. A senile old man who should have retired years ago. He turned to security. Escort Mr. Morrison from the building. If he returns, call the police. Wait, Doctor. Jason Webb appeared behind Harrison. The young transplant fellow held up his phone. Dr. Blackwell, you need to see this. Someone just sent me a video. A complete protocol for Lucas Chen's transplant. Sir, it's brilliant. It addresses every immunological problem. If this works, let me see that, Harrison snapped, grabbing the phone. Gabe had sent the video to every transplant surgeon in the facility, every nurse, every coordinator, and he'd posted it to a medical forum where transplant specialists worldwide could review it. Harrison's face went pale as he watched, then red, then purple with rage. This is Morrison's work, he said finally. I recognize his techniques. Jason, this man is a convicted felon. He's not a doctor. He's a criminal. He's a genius, Jason said quietly. Sir, I just sent this protocol to immunologists at Hopkins and Penn. They both say it could work. It's unconventional, but the science is sound. I don't care if it's sound. Harrison shouted. Morrison is not authorized to design transplant protocols. He lost that right when he trafficked organs. When he let a United States senator die. When he followed the transplant list. Thomas Erickson's voice echoed from the doorway. The old immunologist walked slowly into the lab, leaning on his cane. Harrison, you want to have this conversation here? Or should we discuss it in front of the medical board? Harrison's jaw clenched. Thomas, I'm warning you. Stay out of this. Or what? Thomas asked mildly. You'll destroy my career? Harrison, I'm 70 years old with terminal cancer. I have 6 months to live. What exactly can you threaten me with? The lab fell silent. Even the security guards looked uncomfortable. I didn't know, Harrison said, his voice softer. Thomas, I'm sorry. Save your sympathy, Thomas interrupted. I don't need it. What I need is for you to stop protecting a corrupt system and start acting like a doctor. He pulled out a tablet. This is the documentation from Gabriel Morrison's case. The real documentation, not the sanitized version the hospital presented at trial. He tapped the screen and a document appeared. Senator Whitmore was number 68 on the pediatric heart transplant list. Maria Rodriguez was number 1. She'd been waiting 9 months. She was dying. The senator had been on the list for 3 weeks and wasn't even in critical condition yet. The senator had political connections, Harrison started. The senator had money, Thomas corrected. He donated $5 million to this hospital the week before he tried to jump the list. $5 million, Harrison. And you know what happened. The transplant committee suddenly reconsidered Maria's case, found concerns about her family's ability to provide post-op care, tried to bump her down the list to make room for Whitmore. That's not, Harrison stopped, his face flushing. You were on that committee, Thomas said. You voted to bump Maria down. You, Kenneth Price, and 3 other surgeons who've since left the program. Gabriel Morrison refused. He performed the transplant on Maria Rodriguez because she was next on the list. Because that's what the rules required. Because that's what medical ethics demanded. Jason Webb was staring at Harrison with something like horror. "Dr. Blackwell, is this true?" "It's more complicated than is it true?" Jason demanded. Harrison looked around the lab, at Thomas's steady gaze, at Jason's shock, at Gabe's quiet fury, at the security guards who were suddenly very interested in the floor. "The senator was a powerful man," Harrison said finally. "His death created problems for this hospital, legal problems, financial problems. Someone had to take responsibility. So you destroyed Gabriel Morrison," Thomas said. "You let him go to prison for doing exactly what transplant ethics required. You let the media call him an organ trafficker. You let his son die because no surgeon would operate on a criminal's child. Tell me, Harrison, how do you sleep at night?" "I did what was necessary to protect this program," Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We save hundreds of lives every year. That's more important than one man's career." "What about Lucas Chen?" Gabe asked quietly. All eyes turned to him. "Is he less important than your statistics? Is a 7-year-old boy's life worth less than your 98% success rate?" "That's not fair," Harrison said. "Fair?" Gabe's voice rose. "My son was 7 years old when he died. 7. Same age as Lucas. He needed a kidney transplant. Simple procedure. 95% success rate. But no one would do it because I was the organ trafficker. They let him die to punish me. So don't talk to me about fair, Harrison. Don't tell me how you had to destroy my life to save your precious program." "I'm sorry about your son," Harrison said. "I truly am. But that doesn't change the fact that you're not a doctor anymore. You can't practice medicine." "I'm not practicing medicine," Gabe said. "I'm designing a preservation protocol, which is exactly what my job description allows. I'm an organ preservation technician. This is organ preservation. It's a transplant protocol," Harrison said. "It's both," Thomas interjected. "And Harrison, here's what's going to happen. You're going to review Gabriel's protocol. You're going to consult with immunologists, real ones, not just your transplant team. And if they confirm what we already know, that this protocol could save Lucas Chen, you're going to use it. And if I refuse, then I go public," Thomas said. "I have documentation of everything. The $5 million donation, the committee meeting where you voted to bump Maria Rodriguez, the emails discussing how to handle the Morrison problem, the internal memos about protecting the hospital's reputation. I've been collecting evidence for 13 years, Harrison. I was waiting for the right moment. This is it." Harrison's face went white. "That's blackmail." "That's justice," Thomas corrected. "You have two choices. Save Lucas Chen using Gabriel's protocol, or watch your career end when I expose what you did. Choose, doctor." Michelle Santos had been standing in the hallway listening. She stepped into the lab now, her expression troubled. "Harrison, I've reviewed the protocol. It's sound. Unorthodox, but sound. If Morrison really designed this in 6 hours with basement equipment, he's even more brilliant than I thought." "You're defending him?" Harrison asked incredulously. "I'm defending good medicine," Michelle said. "Harrison, I've built my career on safe cases with guaranteed success. I know that. Everyone knows that. But I became a surgeon to save lives, not to protect statistics. If this protocol works, we should use it. The odds are still below 5%, Harrison said. "The odds are 0 if we do nothing," Jason pointed out. "Dr. Blackwell, I joined this program because I wanted to learn from the best. But the best doesn't mean the safest. It means the most skilled, the most innovative, the most willing to fight for patients." He looked at Gabe. "Dr. Morrison, I've read your papers, the ones from before. You revolutionized transplant immunology. Your work on antibody desensitization is still cited in every major journal. Why did you stop publishing?" "Hard to publish from a prison cell," Gabe said dryly. "But you kept working," Jason said. "That video you sent, that's not 6 hours of work. That's years of research. You've been developing these techniques all along, haven't you?" Gabe hesitated, then nodded. "In prison, I had access to a medical library. I read everything I could find on immunology, transplant rejection, organ preservation. When I got out, I worked odd jobs in medical facilities, always the lowest positions, janitor, orderly. Eventually, organ preservation technician. But I never stopped learning. Never stopped developing new approaches. Why? Michelle asked. After what happened to you, why keep trying? Gabe's voice was quiet but steady. Because my son died. Because the system failed him. Because I couldn't save him, but maybe I can save other children the system abandons. Lucas Chen is being abandoned. Not because the medicine doesn't exist, I just proved it does, but because surgeons care more about their success rates than about a dying child. The accusation hung in the air. Harrison looked around the lab, at his colleagues' faces, at the security guards who'd heard everything, at the protocol displayed on Jason's phone. Brilliant, innovative, potentially life-saving. If we try this and it fails, Harrison said slowly, the family will sue. The media will crucify us. The transplant board will investigate. Our funding could be cut. And if we don't try, a 7-year-old boy dies, Thomas said. What's it going to be, Harrison? Your reputation or a child's life? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, I need to review the protocol. Thoroughly. With immunologists. If they sign off, and I mean legitimate immunologists, not just people who owe you favors, Thomas, then will consider it. Lucas doesn't have time for extensive reviews, Gabe said. He has maybe 12 hours left. Then we work fast, Harrison said. He looked at Gabe. Morrison, you're coming with me. You're going to explain every single step of this protocol. Every decision. Every modification. If there's even a hint that you're putting this boy at risk for personal vindication, I'm trying to save his life, Gabe said. That's all. I don't want vindication. I don't want my reputation back. I just want Lucas Chen to live to see his 8th birthday. Harrison studied him for a long moment. Then, let's go. Jason, call the immunology department. Michelle, inform the surgical team we may have a transplant tonight. Thomas, you're coming too. If this goes wrong, I want witnesses that we did everything properly. As they left the lab, Nurse Deborah Miller stepped out from where she'd been standing in the hallway. She'd heard everything, Dr. Blackwell, she said quietly. IOMR. Morrison, an apology. I've spent years thinking he was a criminal, telling other nurses to watch him, making his life difficult. I didn't know the truth. Few people did, Thomas said. The hospital made sure of that. The hospital, Deborah said bitterly. I've worked here 23 years. I thought we were the good guys. I thought we saved lives no matter what. But we let politics and money decide who lives and dies, don't we? Some of us do, Harrison said quietly. And we're going to stop. Starting tonight. 3 hours later, the immunology consultation was complete. 4 independent immunologists had reviewed Gabe's protocol. All 4 agreed. It was brilliant, unconventional, and had a legitimate chance of success. The odds weren't great, maybe 20%, possibly 30% if everything went perfectly. But 20% was infinitely better than 0. Lucas Chen's parents were brought into a consultation room. David and Sarah Chen looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, aged beyond their years by 6 months of watching their son die slowly. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Harrison began. We have a possible option for Lucas. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. David leaned forward. What kind of option? A new transplant protocol, Harrison said. It's experimental, unproven. The success rate is low, maybe 20 to 30%. But it's a chance. Who designed it? David asked. Harrison hesitated, glanced at Gabe. One of our organ preservation specialists. Drive. Gabriel Morrison. Doctor. Sarah frowned. I thought he was a technician. He is now, Thomas said gently. But he used to be a transplant surgeon. A very good one. He lost his medical license 13 years ago for following transplant ethics instead of political pressure. He went to prison. When he got out, he couldn't practice surgery anymore. But he never stopped learning. Never stopped developing new techniques. Mrs. Chen, what he's created for Lucas is the most advanced transplant protocol I've seen in 40 years of immunology. Why would he help us? David asked suspiciously. What does he want? Gabe spoke for the first time. I had a son. Noah. He was 4 when I went to prison. 7 when he needed a kidney transplant. No surgeon would operate on him because I was a convicted felon. They said it would destroy their reputations. He died on the transplant list. I don't want Lucas to die the same way. I don't want you to bury your 7-year-old because the medical system failed him." Sarah began to cry. David put his arm around her, his own eyes wet. "Will it work?" David asked. "I don't know," Gabe said honestly. "The odds aren't good. Lucas's antibodies are extremely aggressive. His body has already rejected for organ sets. This protocol addresses the problems that caused those rejections, but there are no guarantees. He could reject these organs too. The surgery itself is dangerous. He's very weak. There are 1,000 things that could go wrong. But there's a chance," Sarah said. "There's a chance," Gabe confirmed. "And if we don't try?" David asked. "Lucas will die within 12 hours, Harrison said quietly. "I'm sorry. I wish I could offer you certainty. But this is all we have." David and Sarah looked at each other. Some wordless communication passed between them. Then Sarah nodded. "Do it," David said. "Whatever you need. Whatever it takes. Save our son." "We'll need your consent," Harrison said, pulling out forms. "You need to understand if this fails, if Lucas dies during or after the surgery, you cannot hold the hospital responsible. The protocol is experimental, unproven. We're trying something no one has attempted before." "I don't care about lawsuits," Sarah said fiercely. "I care about my son. Give me the forms. I'll sign anything." 20 minutes later, the surgical team assembled. Harrison would perform the transplant. He was still the most skilled technical surgeon in the facility. Michelle would assist. Jason would observe and learn. Gabe would supervise the organ preservation and perfusion, ensuring his protocol was followed exactly. "If anything goes wrong," Harrison said to Gabe as they scrubbed in, "I'm blaming you. I want that clear. My reputation is on the line here." "Your reputation," Gabe said quietly, "is worth less than Lucas Chen's life. If you ever forget that again, you should quit surgery." Harrison looked at him sharply. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You're right. I did forget. For 13 years, I protected statistics instead of patients. I destroyed your life to protect this program's reputation. I let fear and politics override medical judgment." He met Gabe's eyes. "I'm sorry. It's inadequate, I know. But I'm sorry. Apologize by saving Lucas," Gabe said. "That's all I want." The surgery took 11 hours. 11 hours of meticulous, painstaking work. Harrison's hands skilled as they were followed Gabe's protocol exactly. The organs, preserved in Gabe's custom solution and perfused through his modified system, showed none of the damage that had plagued previous attempts. The immunosuppression protocol began even before the organs entered Lucas's body, preparing his immune system to accept rather than attack. Gabe watched from the observation gallery, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Thomas sat beside him, equally tense. "It's working," Thomas whispered as the new heart began to beat in Lucas's chest. "Gabriel, it's working." "Don't," Gabe said. "Don't hope yet. The real test comes in the next 72 hours. That's when the rejection happens. That's when we'll know if the protocol holds." But he was hoping too. Desperately. Terrifyingly. At 3 a.m. Harrison emerged from surgery, exhausted but cautiously optimistic. The organs are functioning. No immediate rejection signs. He's stable. Critical, but stable. Lucas's parents rushed forward. "Can we see him?" "I see you," Harrison said. "He's sedated and on life support, but yes. You can see him." As David and Sarah hurried toward the ICU, Harrison turned to Gabe. "You should come. You're as much a part of this as I am." "I'm just the technician," Gabe said. "No," Harrison said firmly. "You're the doctor who saved that boy's life. Come. Take credit for what you've done." In the ICU, Lucas lay surrounded by monitors and machines. But his new heart beat steadily. His new lungs expanded and contracted. His body, for the first time in months, was receiving the oxygen it desperately needed. Sarah Chen saw Gabe enter and immediately crossed to him. "You saved him. You saved my baby." "He's not saved yet," Gabe cautioned, "Mrs. Chen. The next 3 days are critical. His body could still reject the organs. We have to wait and watch." "But he has a chance now," Sarah said. "Because of you. Thank you. Thank you." Gabe felt something break inside him. The wall he'd built around his heart for 13 years, the armor that had kept him functioning through prison, through his son's death, through years of humiliation and obscurity, cracked. Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry I couldn't save my son," he whispered. "I'm sorry Noah died. But maybe saving Lucas means something. Maybe it means Noah's death wasn't completely meaningless." Thomas put a hand on his shoulder. "Noah's death taught you what matters. It made you fight for children the system abandons. That's not meaningless, Gabriel. That's purpose." Over the next 72 hours, the entire transplant center held its breath. Nurses checked Lucas's vitals every hour. Doctors reviewed his lab work constantly. And Gabe barely left the hospital, monitoring every indicator, adjusting the immunosuppression protocol in real time based on Lucas's response. On the second day, there was a crisis. Lucas's antibody levels spiked. Early signs of rejection. "He's rejecting," Kenneth Price said, his voice holding a note of vindication. "I told you this wouldn't work. We need to remove the organs before they're completely destroyed." "No," Gabe said firmly. "This is expected. His immune system is testing the new organs. We increase the immunosuppression, add targeted antibody treatments, and give his body time to adapt." "You're guessing," Kenneth said. "I'm applying 13 years of research," Gabe corrected. "Trust the protocol. Give it time." Harrison looked at the monitors, at Lucas's struggling body, at Gabe's confident face. "How much time?" 12 hours, Gabe said. "If the antibodies don't stabilize in 12 hours, we'll reconsider." It was the longest 12 hours of Gabe's life. But at hour 11, Lucas's antibody levels began to drop. His body was accepting the organs. The protocol was working. "I'll be damned," Kenneth whispered, staring at the lab results. "It's actually working." On the third day, Lucas opened his eyes. On the fourth day, he was breathing partially on his own. On the fifth day, he asked for his parents and smiled when he saw them. "You're going to be okay, baby," Sarah told him, crying and laughing simultaneously. "You're going to be okay." Lucas looked around the ICU with a child's curiosity. "Who fixed me?" Sarah looked at Gabe, standing quietly in the corner. "That man. His name is Dr. Morrison. He's a hero." "I'm not a hero," Gabe said quietly. "Yes, you are," Lucas said with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old. "Heroes save people. You saved me." News of Lucas Chen's successful transplant spread through the hospital like wildfire. Within days, it reached medical journals. Within weeks, it was international news. Experimental protocol saves impossible transplant case. Disgraced surgeon redeems himself with revolutionary technique. From prison to medical breakthrough, the Gabriel Morrison story. But Gabe avoided the spotlight. He returned to his basement lab, to his organ preservation work, trying to fade back into obscurity. Thomas wouldn't let him. "Gabriel, we have 17 requests from hospitals asking about your protocol," Thomas said, appearing in the basement lab 2 weeks after Lucas's surgery. "Transplant centers in Boston, Houston, Seattle, even London. They all want to implement your techniques. They can have them," Gabe said, not looking up from the preservation unit he was calibrating. "I'll write up the protocols. Send them out. Free of charge." "That's not how this works," Thomas said. "These are revolutionary techniques. You could patent them, license them, make millions of dollars." "I don't want millions of dollars," Gabe said. "I want children to live. If these protocols can save lives, they should be available to everyone. No patents, no licensing fees, no barriers." Thomas smiled. "I thought you'd say that. So I took the liberty of setting up something else." He pulled out a tablet. "The Morrison Foundation for Transplant Equity. It's a non-profit organization dedicated to monitoring fairness in organ distribution. We'll investigate cases where wealthy or influential patients might be jumping the transplant list. We'll advocate for families who can't afford transplant costs. We'll provide your protocols free to any hospital that wants them." Gabe finally looked up. "Thomas, I can't run a foundation. I'm a convicted felon. I have no credibility." "No, you have me," Thomas interrupted. "I'll be the public face, the chairman. I have 6 months to live, Gabriel. Let me use them to finish what we started 13 years ago. Let me expose the corruption in the transplant system. Let me clear your name." My name doesn't matter, Gabe said. It matters to the next Gabriel Morrison, Thomas said. The next brilliant surgeon who tries to do the right thing and gets destroyed for it. It matters to every patient who gets pushed down the transplant list because someone with money and connections wants their organ. Your name matters, Gabriel. Your story matters because it shows that the system can be challenged, that corruption can be exposed, that one person with courage and knowledge can make a difference. Gabe was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, build your foundation. Clear my name if you can. But Thomas, the work is what matters, not the credit. We focus on saving lives, on creating protocols that work, on making sure every patient, rich or poor, connected or forgotten, has an equal chance. Deal, Thomas said. 3 months later, the Morrison Foundation held its first press conference. Thomas, frail but determined, stood at a podium surrounded by reporters, cameras, and medical professionals from around the world. 13 years ago, Thomas began. A brilliant transplant surgeon named Gabriel Morrison was destroyed for following medical ethics. He gave a heart transplant to the patient, who was legitimately first on the waiting list, a 7-year-old girl named Maria Rodriguez. Powerful people wanted that heart to go to someone else, someone with money, someone with political connections. When Dr. Morrison refused to bypass the official list, those powerful people destroyed him. Thomas pulled up documents on a screen behind him. This is a $5 million donation from Senator Whitmore to the Philadelphia Advanced Transplant Center. This is dated 1 week before the senator tried to jump the transplant list. This is the internal email from the hospital's development director suggesting that special consideration be given to the senator's case. This is the transplant committee meeting minutes where Dr. Harrison Blackwell and others voted to bump Maria Rodriguez down the list to make room for the senator. The reporters erupted with questions. Thomas held up his hand. Dr. Morrison refused to participate in this corruption. He performed the transplant on Maria Rodriguez as the rules required. The senator died 3 days later when no other compatible heart became available. The senator's family, supported by the hospital's legal team, accused Dr. Morrison of organ trafficking, of accepting bribes, of deliberately killing a United States senator. None of it was true. All of it destroyed Dr. Morrison's life. Thomas clicked to another image. A young boy. This is Noah Morrison, Gabriel Morrison's son. He needed a kidney transplant at age 7. No surgeon would perform the operation because they didn't want to be associated with the organ trafficker's son. Noah died on the transplant waiting list. 7 years old. Killed not by kidney disease, but by a medical community that valued reputation over human life. The room was silent now. Some reporters were crying. 3 months ago, Thomas continued, Dr. Morrison working as an organ preservation technician. The only job he could get with his criminal record saved another 7-year-old boy, Lucas Chen. The boy had been rejected by every transplant surgeon in the country. Too high risk. Bad for their statistics. Drive. Morrison developed a revolutionary protocol that accomplished what everyone said was impossible. Lucas Chen is alive today because Gabriel Morrison never stopped being a doctor, never stopped caring about patients, never stopped fighting for children the system had abandoned. Thomas looked directly into the cameras. The Morrison Foundation will investigate organ distribution fairness. We will expose cases where money or influence determines who lives and dies. We will provide Dr. Morrison's protocols, free to any hospital. And we will fight to ensure that what happened to Gabriel Morrison never happens to another doctor who has the courage to do the right thing. He paused. Now, I'd like to introduce the man himself. Drive. Gabriel Morrison. Gabe emerged from backstage, uncomfortable in a suit, his hands shaking slightly. He'd avoided publicity for months, but Thomas had insisted this was necessary. I'm not good at speeches, Gabe said into the microphone. I'm a surgeon. Or I was. Now I'm a technician. I prepare organs for transplant. It's honest work. I'm grateful for it. He looked at the crowd of reporters and medical professionals. But I want to tell you something about the transplant system in this country. It's supposed to be fair, equitable, based on medical need, not wealth or connections. But it's not. Rich patients jump the list. Poor patients die waiting. Hospitals make decisions based on statistics and funding rather than saving lives. His voice grew stronger. 13 years ago, I followed the rules. I gave an organ to the patient who was next on the list, a little girl named Maria Rodriguez. She's in the audience today. Maria, would you stand? A young woman in the third row stood. She was 20 years old, beautiful, healthy, radiating life. Maria is alive because I refuse to let money determine who lives and dies, Gabe said. But my son Noah is dead because the medical community punished me for that choice. They let a 7-year-old boy die to make a point, to show what happens when you challenge the system. He looked at Maria. Was it worth it? I've asked myself that question every day for 13 years. My son died. My career was destroyed. My life was shattered. Was saving Maria Rodriguez worth all that? The room was utterly silent. Yes, Gabe said finally, because Maria deserved to live. Because the rules matter. Because medicine is supposed to be about saving lives, not protecting the powerful. But here's what I want everyone to understand. It shouldn't have cost my son's life. The system that forces doctors to choose between ethics and survival, that system is broken. And we're going to fix it. The press conference made international headlines. Within days, 3 transplant centers were under investigation for accepting donations from wealthy patients who subsequently jumped waiting lists. Within weeks, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced a comprehensive audit of organ distribution practices. And at the Philadelphia Advanced Transplant Center, things began to change. Drive. Harrison Blackwell called a staff meeting 1 month after the press conference. The entire transplant team assembled: surgeons, nurses, coordinators, technicians. I owe all of you an apology, Harrison began. For 13 years, I've led this program with the wrong priorities. I focused on statistics, on success rates, on rankings and reputation. And in doing so, I forgot why we became doctors. I forgot that every patient deserves our best effort, regardless of the odds, regardless of how their outcome might affect our numbers. He looked around the room. Gabriel Morrison taught me that lesson. He never stopped fighting for patients, even when the system destroyed him for it. He never compromised his ethics, even when it cost him everything. That's the kind of doctor I should have been. That's the kind of program we should be running. Harrison clicked to a presentation. Effective immediately, we're changing how this center operates. First, no more refusing high-risk cases to protect our statistics. If a patient needs a transplant, and we have the medical ability to attempt it, we attempt it. Second, we're implementing Dr. Morrison's protocols as standard practice for all high antibody cases. Third, we're establishing a fund to help families who can't afford transplant costs. And fourth, we're creating a position, Director of Transplant Innovation. He looked at Gabe, who was standing in the back of the room. Dr. Morrison, I know you can't practice surgery. Your medical license is still revoked. But you can design protocols. You can train surgeons. You can supervise preservation and preparation. You can do everything except physically perform the transplants. I'm offering you that position, Director of Transplant Innovation. You'll work with our surgical team to tackle the cases everyone else refuses. You'll develop new techniques. You'll train the next generation of transplant surgeons to value patients over statistics. Gabe stared at him. Harrison, I'm a convicted felon. Having me in a leadership position is exactly what this program needs, Harrison interrupted. Gabriel, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what happened 13 years ago. I was wrong to protect the hospital's reputation instead of supporting the doctor who was doing the right thing. I can't undo that, but I can make sure it never happens again. Say yes. Help us build something better. Gabe looked around the room. At Dr. Michelle Santos, who was nodding encouragement, at Dr. Jason Webb, who was grinning, at Nurse Deborah Miller, who had tears in her eyes, at the younger residents and fellows who were watching him with something like awe. Okay, Gabe said quietly. I'll do it, but on one condition. We don't just change the center. We change the system. We share every protocol we develop. We train surgeons from other hospitals. We advocate for policy changes at the national level. We make transplant medicine what it should be: fair, innovative, and focused on saving lives. Deal, Harrison said. Over the next year, the Morrison Foundation and the Philadelphia Advanced Transplant Center became forces for change in American medicine. They published 23 new protocols for high-risk transplants. They trained over 100 surgeons from hospitals around the world. They successfully lobbied for stronger oversight of organ distribution practices. And they saved lives, so many lives. A 15-year-old girl in Detroit with lupus antibodies that had rejected 3 kidneys saved. With Morrison's immunosuppression protocol, a 3-year-old boy in San Francisco with a rare genetic liver disease saved with modified organ preservation techniques. A 42-year-old mother in Atlanta who'd been on the heart transplant list for 5 years because her antibody profile made matching impossible saved. With personalized desensitization therapy, each success brought new referrals. Each success proved that impossible cases were only impossible until someone had the courage and knowledge to challenge conventional wisdom. Lucas Chen, now 8 years old, became the foundation's unofficial mascot. He visited the transplant center regularly, talking to patients awaiting surgery, offering hope to families in despair. "Doctor, Morrison saved my life," Lucas told a 6-year-old girl waiting for a heart transplant. "Everyone said I was going to die, but he didn't give up. He figured out how to fix me, and he's going to help you too." The girl Emma Rodriguez, no relation to Maria, looked up at Gabe with huge, hopeful eyes. "You can fix me. I'm going to try," Gabe promised. "Your case is complicated, Emma, but complicated doesn't mean impossible. It just means we have to work harder, be smarter, care more, and I promise you, we'll care more about saving your life than about anything else." Emma's transplant was successful. So was the next one, and the next. Drive. Thomas Erickson lived to see the foundation's first anniversary. He died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by the people he'd helped save. Maria Rodriguez, now a second-year medical student. Lucas Chen and his parents. Emma Rodriguez and her parents. 43 other patients whose lives had been saved by protocols Thomas had helped develop and distribute. At Thomas's funeral, Gabe spoke through tears. "Thomas taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified of the consequences. He stood by me when everyone else abandoned me. He fought for 13 years to clear my name. He built a foundation that will outlive both of us and continue saving lives long after we're gone." Thomas Erickson was the best doctor I ever knew, not because of his surgical skill or his research, but because he never forgot that medicine is about human beings, about fighting for people the system wants to forget, about having the courage to challenge corruption even when it costs you everything. Maria Rodriguez spoke next. "I was 7 years old when Dr. Morrison gave me a heart transplant. I was nobody, poor family, no connections, just a sick kid who happened to be first on the transplant list. Drive. Morrison followed the rules. He did what was right, and they destroyed him for it. But he never stopped fighting, never stopped caring, never stopped being the doctor I needed. Today, I'm alive because Dr. Morrison had courage, because Dr. Erickson stood by him, because some people still believe that every life has equal value." She looked at Gabe. "I'm going to be a transplant surgeon. I'm going to follow your example. I'm going to fight for patients who need advocates. And I'm going to make sure that what happened to you never happens to another doctor who tries to do the right thing." 2 years after Lucas Chen's transplant, Gabriel Morrison received an unexpected visitor. Senator Rachel Whitmore, daughter of the senator who had died 13 years earlier. "Dr. Morrison," she said, sitting in his office at the transplant center, "I owe you an apology. More than an apology. I owe you acknowledgement of a terrible wrong." Gabe looked at her warily. "Senator Whitmore, I don't—" "Please," she interrupted. "Let me speak. My father was a great man in many ways, but he was also flawed. When he needed a heart transplant, he used his power and connections to try to jump the waiting list. He donated $5 million to this hospital. He pressured the transplant committee. He demanded special treatment because he believed his life was more valuable than a child's." Her voice shook. "You refused. You followed the rules. You gave that heart to Maria Rodriguez because she was next on the list. And my father died. For 13 years, my family blamed you. We destroyed your career. We let you go to prison. We let your son die. We did terrible things because we couldn't accept that you were right." Rachel pulled out documents. "This is my father's personal journal. I found it last year while sorting through his papers. In it, he admits everything. The attempted bribery, the political pressure, the plan to destroy you if you didn't comply. He knew Maria Rodriguez was legitimately first on the list. He knew what he was trying to do was wrong, but he wanted to live. And in his desperation, he became the villain." She looked at Gabe with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I can't bring back your son. I can't give you 13 years of your life, but I can acknowledge the truth. You were right. My father was wrong, and the system that destroyed you for doing the right thing needs to change." Rachel stood. "I'm introducing legislation, the Morrison Act. It will create federal oversight of organ transplant lists, mandatory investigations of large donations to transplant centers, criminal penalties for attempting to use money or influence to jump the waiting list, protections for doctors who refuse to participate in corruption. It won't undo what happened to you, but maybe it will prevent it from happening to others." Gabe stood and extended his hand. "Thank you, Senator. That took courage." "Not as much courage as you showed," Rachel said. "Dr. Morrison, my father made terrible choices at the end of his life, but because of what you endured, because of the system you're building, other families won't face that temptation. Other children won't die because someone with money thought their life mattered more. That's your legacy. That's what you've built from the ashes of your suffering." 5 years after Lucas Chen's transplant, the Philadelphia Advanced Transplant Center held a celebration. They just completed their 500th successful high-risk transplant using Morrison protocols. Their success rate for impossible cases had climbed to 73%, far exceeding anything anyone had thought achievable. The celebration was held in the hospital's main atrium. Patients, families, doctors, nurses, and advocates filled the space. A banner hung overhead. 500 lives saved. Every patient matters. Dr. Harrison Blackwell took the microphone. 5 years ago, this program was failing. Not in our statistics, those were excellent, but in our purpose. We'd forgotten why we became doctors. We'd let fear and politics override our commitment to saving lives. Then Gabriel Morrison reminded us what really matters. Not our success rates, not our reputation, not our comfort, but our patients. Every single one of them, regardless of how difficult their case might be. Harrison looked at Gabe, who was standing to the side trying to be inconspicuous. "Gabriel, come up here." Reluctantly, Gabe joined Harrison at the microphone. "Gabriel Morrison," Harrison said, "you've trained 47 transplant surgeons in your protocols. You've developed 32 new preservation and immunosuppression techniques. You've saved 500 patients who were told nothing more could be done. You've changed how transplant medicine is practiced around the world. And you've done all of this while still carrying the conviction on your record, while still unable to practice surgery yourself, while still living with the pain of what was done to you 13 years ago." Harrison turned to face Gabe directly. "I was part of that system that destroyed you. I voted to bump Maria Rodriguez down the transplant list. I testified against you at trial. I let your son die without advocating for him. For 13 years, I've lived with that guilt. For 5 years, I've tried to make amends by following your example. But words aren't enough. Actions aren't enough. So today, I'm doing something I should have done 13 years ago." Harrison pulled out a document. "This is a formal statement from the Transplant Committee, signed by every member. It acknowledges that you followed proper procedure in Maria Rodriguez's case. It acknowledges that Senator Whitmore attempted to corrupt the transplant list. It acknowledges that you were wrongly convicted. And it recommends that the Pennsylvania Medical Board restore your medical license immediately." Gabe stared at the document. "Harrison, they won't, they will," Harrison interrupted, "because this statement is accompanied by letters from 312 patients whose lives you saved, from 47 surgeons you trained, from advocacy organizations, from transplant centers around the world, from Senator Rachel Whitmore, and from the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services. Gabriel, the medical board is meeting next week. You will have your license back. You will be Dr. Gabriel Morrison again. Not just in our hearts, but officially. Legally. Permanently. The room erupted in applause. Lucas Chen ran up on stage and hugged Gabe. Maria Rodriguez followed, tears streaming down her face. Emma Rodriguez and 43 other patients whose lives Gabe had saved crowded the stage. "You saved us," Lucas said. "Now it's our turn to save you." 6 months later, Dr. Gabriel Morrison, fully licensed, fully vindicated, performed his first surgery in 13 years. It was a high-risk pediatric heart transplant for a 6-year-old girl whose antibodies had rejected to previous attempts. The surgery took 9 hours. Every moment, Gabe felt the weight of 13 years bearing down on him. The prison time, his son's death, the years of humiliation and obscurity. But he also felt the hope of 5 years of redemption. The 500 lives saved. The system changed. The foundation built. When the new heart began beating in the little girl's chest, Gabe closed his eyes and whispered, "This one's for you, Noah. For you and every child the system failed. We're making it better. One patient at a time. One life at a time. I promise." The little girl Sofia Martinez made a complete recovery. She went home 3 weeks after surgery, healthy and whole and alive, because someone had refused to give up on her. At the Morrison Foundation's annual gala that year, Gabriel Morrison stood before 800 medical professionals, patients, and advocates. He'd been asked to give the keynote address. 10 years ago, he began, "I was in prison, convicted of organ trafficking, destroyed for following transplant ethics. My son was dead. My career was gone. My life was shattered. If you'd told me then that I'd be standing here today licensed, vindicated, celebrated, I wouldn't have believed you." He looked around the room. "But if you'd told me that 500 children would be alive because of protocols I developed in a basement with obsolete equipment, if you'd told me that the transplant system would change, that corruption would be exposed, that doctors would have protection for doing the right thing, that I might believe. Because that was never about me. That was about the patients, about children like Maria Rodriguez and Lucas Chen and Sofia Martinez who deserved a chance to live." Gabe's voice grew stronger. "We haven't fixed everything. There's still corruption in organ distribution. Still patients who die because they can't afford transplants. Still cases where money and influence determine who lives. But we're fighting. We're changing the system. One protocol at a time. One hospital at a time. One saved life at a time." He looked directly at the audience. "If you're a doctor who's been told to protect your statistics instead of your patients, fight back. If you're a surgeon who's been pressured to give special treatment to wealthy patients, refuse. If you're a nurse or technician who sees corruption, report it. The system only changes when enough of us have the courage to say, every patient matters. Every life has value. And medicine is about saving people, not protecting the powerful." The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Gabriel Morrison never sought glory, never wanted fame, never cared about reputation or recognition. What he'd always wanted was to save children the system had abandoned, to make medicine what it should be, fair, innovative, and focused on human life above all else. He'd lost his son, lost 13 years of his life, lost everything that mattered, but he'd gained something to purpose, redemption, a legacy that would save lives long after he was gone. The heart of the matter wasn't in prestige or power. It was in a 7-year-old boy named Lucas Chen taking his first breath with new lungs. In a young woman named Maria Rodriguez studying to become a surgeon. In 500 families who got to keep their children because someone refused to give up. That was what mattered. That was what made 13 years of suffering worthwhile. That was the true heart of medicine. One patient at a time. One life at a time. One miracle born from pain and perseverance, and an unshakable commitment to the value of every human life. Drive. Gabriel Morrison had found his way home, not to the operating room he'd lost, but to something better, a purpose that transcended personal redemption and became a movement to change medicine itself. And that, in the end, was worth everything.